If it's so reasonable, in your opinion, to cancel an election, why did the Labour government only when it was forced to, because it realised that it was actually illegal what it was doing?
Because
why did the government
is now using lawfare to take over?
Hold on.
You had no statutory right to cancel elections.
No, you've been proven to be, that's been proven to be illegal. You're not allowed to cancel elections in that.
This is the moment the entire argument falls apart. Not because of opinion, but because of legitimacy. You just heard a direct accusation that cancelling elections wasn't just controversial, it was illegal. And when the legality of power itself is questioned, everything changes, because authority doesn't come from intention, it comes from permission, and that permission only comes from voters. What makes this moment so uncomfortable isn't just the accusation, it's the fact that it strikes at the core of democratic authority. Elections are not optional. They are not flexible. They are not subject to convenience. They are the single mechanism that separates democratic leadership from imposed control. And when politicians begin operating in ways that even raise the question of legality, public trust doesn't weaken slowly. It collapses immediately. Because voters understand something politicians often forget. Power isn't owned, it's borrowed. And what you're about to see next shows exactly how fragile that borrowed authority becomes when it's forced to defend itself under pressure. If you believe politicians should never have the power to delay accountability, make sure you like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Because the moments that expose the truth are the ones they never expect you to examine closely.
I would fundamentally disagree with that. Having knocked on many doors asking Labour households their opinions and what their issues are, and often when I knock on those doors, I'll say, "Hello, yeah, I'm here for the council election, as you know, I'm your councillor," and they'll say, "Great, yeah, okay. Well, the potholes outside, they need sorting." I say, "Oh, sorry, that's the other council." And that's why Labour said in their manifesto that they wanted a single tier of local government to make it more effective and efficient. So that is a huge change that we're trying to bring through in quite quick order. Don't forget that we've got a lot of demand at the minute to bring change into materiality very quickly.
Yeah, but not authoritarian change.
Well, hold on. But that has been given assent. It was in the manifesto and the King's Speech bringing local government reform.
It wasn't in the manifesto to cancel elections. That was not in the manifesto.
In order to do that, there's been a huge onus on councils like mine who have had to do a lot of work alongside all their other services to actually deliver LGR and how this is going to happen. Part of that is going to be current councils to run elections for the new local government, however they may be, the new councils. So the choice was the MHCLG made the decision to consult with councils and say, do you have the capacity to run an election for your council that's going to be defunct in a year or two, as well as run an election for the new council and do all the work that's going to transfer all your responsibilities across? Do you have that?
This is where the argument begins to unravel. Because notice what's happening. The justification isn't rooted in permission, it's rooted in intention. The defense isn't voters approved this specific action. The defense is, we wanted change. But wanting change is not the same as being authorized to bypass accountability. This is the fundamental line that separates democracy from control. In a democracy, power flows upward, from voters to leaders. Permission comes first, action comes second. But when leaders start acting first and explaining later, the entire relationship reverses. And once that reversal happens, trust begins to die. You can hear it in the tone, the shift away from defending voter rights and toward defending administrative convenience. The subtle suggestion that elections themselves can become obstacles rather than obligations. And that's the moment people stop feeling represented and start feeling managed. Because elections are not procedural inconveniences, they are the only reason political authority exists at all. Without them, power becomes self-justifying, self-protecting, self-perpetuating. And once leaders begin deciding when accountability happens, instead of voters deciding the balance of power is already broken, this isn't about one policy decision. It's about a mindset, a belief that control can temporarily replace consent, that power can extend itself without asking. And history has shown every single time where that mindset leads.
And they said, no.
The problem is that elections aren't optional if you have the capacity or not. It's not. By the way, we're thinking of doing elections next year. Do you think you can do it or not? And it's a belief that democracy can be paused or can be not happen if it's not convenient. And this fundamentally is about who has power. Right, and Labour believe that they have power.
But no one's going to have any power. Those people aren't going to have power because their whole council is going to be dissolved.
This is about who has power, right? Is it the ministers or the people? And what we're seeing with Labour is that ministers seem to think that they have the power and not people. Power should flow from the people up. And right now what Labour's doing is it's flowing power from the government down to institutions. You do not, never, ever, in a democracy, do you get to extend your term. It's only voters who have that right, and it should only be extended in an election. And you tried to overrule that fundamental principle of democracy. And I'm afraid to say Reform is the only one that are true believers in democracy, because I'll give it to you, Conservatives...
Democracy always starts within a party, and I'd be interested to know how Reform elects all of its candidates for its election.
People are worried about national democracy.
You've asked about democracy.
Don't try...
Well,
don't try and deflect, because that's all Labour does is deflect.
Parties do have to set an example on the type of democracy that they're going to enact in Parliament, and that is a legitimate question.
If parties have to set an example, then how come all your ministers are mired in scandal? What kind of example are you setting to the public when you appointed? Hang on, Angela Rayner, who's about,
but not all of them.
Angela Rayner, who's being mooted for leader, resigned for a scandal. Starmer might resign for a scandal. I mean, your housing minister, your corruption minister. I mean, you name it. Your ambassador was best friends with the most prolific paedophile. What kind of example is the Labour Party setting for the country there?
So I can't speak for all. If the government had approached, if my council was due to elect this year, it's not. It's due to elect next year. But with all the work we've just done, and officers that have said to us, we don't have the resources to run an election as well as doing all this other work. We would have.
Then you don't do the work and you do the election.
We would have said, well, the work has already been mandated. That's part of the King's Speech. It was part of the manifesto
Loads of things have been
commitment.
mandated and you haven't put it through.
It's totally fine. We're going through a change curve at the minute, and I'm sure if Reform gets into government, you're going to experience all of these things when you want to bring changes in. But we're trying to bring this new layer of local government in, which is pretty much unprecedented. So the decision was to consult with councils and say, can you do it? The answer from many councils, not all, of all different political persuasions.
You basically ask people if they can extend their job.
Your argument here is that we're denying democracy to people. Far from it. We're adding a new layer of democracy, which was going to elect earlier. So we weren't denying them democracy at all, because
then why did you
let's hear the
because
reason,
those particular institutions that were about to go to election will soon be defunct. So the priority was going to be that the new layer of democracy would elect first.
Why did you U-turn? If it's so reasonable, in your opinion, to cancel an election, why did the Labour government only when it was forced to, because it realised that it was actually illegal what it was doing?
Because
why did the government
is now
U-turn?
using lawfare to take
hold on.
You had no statutory right to cancel elections.
No, you've been proven to be. That's been proven to be illegal. You're not allowed to cancel elections in that way. The bar wasn't high enough, and we all know that. Bob says, resign Reid immediately. Dennis says, why just Steve Reid? They're all complicit in this disaster. Robert says, Steve Reid does not have enough political clout to have made the cancellation of elections on his own. Thus, this was a Starmer decision. Once again, he's hiding behind someone else. Okay, and finally, Malcolm says, closing down our council, were we asked if we wanted that? Will our council tax increase or decrease? Yes, good question. Well, I don't believe you were asked, sadly, but they thought that they'd do something and it wasn't going to fit the time, so they'd extend the time. Listen.
This wasn't just an interview. This was a moment where the mask slipped. Because what you witnessed wasn't certainty. It wasn't authority grounded in confidence. It was hesitation. It was justification. It was the uncomfortable reality of power being forced to explain itself after the fact. And you saw it. You saw how quickly the argument shifted away from voters and toward process, away from accountability and toward explanation, away from permission and toward control. This is a pattern. Power becomes comfortable. Power stops asking. Power starts assuming it will remain in place regardless of whether voters are consulted or not. And once that assumption takes hold, democracy stops being a requirement and starts being treated like a technical formality. You heard it. The suggestion that elections could be delayed because they were inconvenient, because they didn't fit the timeline, because the system wasn't ready. But democracy isn't designed to be convenient for politicians. It's designed to protect voters from politicians. And when that principle starts to weaken, trust disappears. This is why trust is gone. Not because people misunderstand politics, but because people understand it perfectly. They recognize hesitation. They recognize deflection. They recognize when authority stops sounding accountable and starts sounding defensive. You felt the hesitation. You saw the discomfort when the accusations became unavoidable, when legality was questioned, when legitimacy itself became the issue. Because once voters begin asking whether those in power still respect their authority, everything changes. This isn't about one minister. It's about whether political leaders still believe they answer to the public or whether they believe they can operate above them. And now the real question is simple. Is this incompetence or is it control? And more importantly, would you trust people like this to decide when you're allowed to vote? If you believe accountability still matters, like the video, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Because the moments that reveal the truth are the moments you're never supposed to look at closely.